Hey, welcome back, my Walking Dead Road to Survival family, to The Road, the second episode of our recurring podcast about what's to come in the future of The Walking Dead Road to Survival. My name's Mason, in-game is Invisinerd, your host here today and community manager at the game. We'll be chatting with a couple of members of the team about war in this episode and what's to come in our pinnacle event. I want to make sure I preface this discussion with a couple of things. You're going to hear us refer to WoC, which is WoC. Internally, this is what we use when we're discussing War of Champions, so you'll hear us refer to WoC often throughout this conversation. I just want to make sure you know what we're talking about. Not WoC, but WoC. Okay, and now that that is obviously cleared up, let's also talk about the hypothetical situations we will be discussing here. All of this is an idea, maybe a direction that we may be headed, but none of it is set in stone. We want to take this opportunity to get some feedback from the community about these topics. So here is your chance to tell us exactly what you think about what's to come on your road to survival. With that being said, let's get into meeting some of the members of the team in this episode of The Road. So introductions, there are kind of like two ways I can describe like your official title, but you're probably better at that and know it more so than I do, or I could say it like we mean here. We'll start with Big EZE. I would say like senior member of the team that creates events and more for players from day to day, week to week, month to month. But what is your official title?
Senior product manager of performance. Got
it. So Wza, on the other side of things, character wizard, lead kit guy. What is your official title?
My official title is senior game designer.
Senior game designer. As we talked earlier, he said, I make the guys. He makes all the guys. That's his job.
All the duders.
All the duders. So in this conversation, you two are really working together when it comes to war. Not only are you putting together the events and the gray market and the season, but that goes hand in hand with the characters that will be used as the meta, and also the reward is a fighter as well, as we know usually for war. So it's good to get both of you together to talk about the future of war, what we might be working towards. And again, I'll reiterate, even though I know I already have, these are just discussion topics as of right now. And this is going to be actually a great way for us to talk about stuff kind of with the players. So you can leave your comments down below, a great place to get your feedback. So let's start with really what was the latest update to war, and that is Mythic Exclusive War. We can chat a little bit, Wza, about why we have decided to just kind of cut the S-class cord, for lack of a better term.
Sure, yeah. Going into the future, we all know that war is the most important feature in our game, right? Hands down. It's the most fun. It's why we get together in factions. It's what we care about. And we want to make sure that we keep the competitive integrity of war at the forefront. We want to move into the future thinking that war will be the place that we could go and not have to worry about certain things getting in the way of how good you are as a player or as a faction. And so when we first introduced Mythic, we knew that we didn't want to get rid of S-Class right away, because S-Class was all your previous investment. We wanted to make sure that the players understood we weren't trying to rip your S-Classes away and do a full roster reset. Despite what anybody may believe, Scopely does not enjoy roster resets. We really don't. There's a lot behind it, and we don't like doing it, even though it's happened quite a few times. But going into this, pushing forward, we started to see that these cheese strategies were actually taking away from players' enjoyment. We saw, Marge starting the game with Guardian Shield on everyone, Scotsman completely removing bleed from things. There's all sorts of Mercer stunning everyone. Was not intended to make it into the Mythic world. In fact, Mythic was supposed to relieve us from a lot of that stuff. So after enough time went by, we saw the players kind of adjusting around it and realizing that it wasn't very fun. And it wasn't keeping with our new stance on competitive integrity. We thought it was a great time to get rid of them and let the players focus on forming real strategies in the Mythic world. So that was our reasoning behind it. I know a long-winded response, but yeah, we took it out so that war would be better for players.
And as we come to this, we're about at the 1 year mark of the Conquest update in the Mythic era. So it's safe to say that the players have for a while been collecting those Mythic fighters. Now Limit Break 3 is unlocked. We're moving into kind of like, I think, a new phase for the game. And in 2022, like we talked about in our last podcast, updating some of those features and some of what's possible moving forward into this kind of next, I guess, plane that we will be exploring. So let's talk about some of those possibilities when it comes to war. There are a lot of defensive fighters out there. I think a lot of players have noticed that, but I think that's for good reason, right? We're talking about multiple defenses in your camp in war, right?
Yeah. Okay. So this is a big one. Our game is the cornerstone, the foundation of how we play and do combat. Is you look at a defensive team, it's a puzzle, and the players derive enjoyment from figuring out that puzzle, defeating it. And so as many defensive teams as we could possibly have open up a multitude of strategies, more defensive variants, the different amount of attack teams that you could build to approach those defensive teams. So when we're talking about war and we're talking about making it more competitive and making your choices matter, like your decisions and how you build, it shouldn't just be about how you approach combat. It should be how you think about your team building. Team building is a huge portion of skill. In fact, it's one of the largest way a player can showcase their skill. So when we're thinking about war, we were contemplating the idea of having many defensive teams for a single player so that they can build their own puzzles in multiple ways, set those up, and then when you're playing against a defensive camp and war, you get to look and see all these different camps, see the different defensive teams, and then figure out which puzzle you can particularly solve in any given war situation. So it adds a massive layer of depth, a bunch of strategy, and I believe we could go into more about the decision making, what's going into multiple defense teams, but we've made sure that we're keeping the time limit the same when we talk about multiple defense teams. When you're fighting wars, like, it shouldn't make the game longer, and we should open up a lot more communication with your teammates and your faction mates on how to approach beating certain teams and certain defenses. Like, you might be able to beat one defense team, your faction mate might be able to beat another, and you can tackle a camp together, rather than right now where it's just, if you have the meta defense team or meta offense team, you just break through everything in front of you.
Yeah, and also, I guess, like from my perspective, like if you're talking about like the concept of like using multiple defense teams in war, like, you know, we've definitely discussed it and brainstormed it, how it could possibly look. And I think the interesting thing is that it provides more variety and also more usefulness of a player's entire roster. So instead of kind of like you just have the first, you know, you have your main five meta relevant defense team. If we could provide more uses for players' content over an extended period of time, so we're not constantly trying to just, you know, acquire content or acquire a new character, upgrade the character, and then, you know, the next few months it's kind of like, okay, you're switching to the next one. If you can provide more use for players' acquired and upgraded content over an extended period of time, that's only better for the players. Yeah, it's something that we've definitely, you know, we've talked about.
That's a great point. So I've been playing the game for 2.5 years, right? I'm deep into the game. I understand it, and one of the things that sucks is this: you buy a character, you max it out, it's good for 3 or 4 months, and then it hits the shelf, right?
Yeah.
When we open up defensive options, just from looking at the game in general, it's going to naturally make your roster last longer, be more viable for longer, your characters stay in rotation longer. It's slowing down power creep. It's making it to where those top meta characters are not nearly as important. And so you get to enjoy these characters that you spent so much love and time in for a much longer period of time. So I think that's an excellent point.
Yeah, and also you kind of talked about creating puzzles, right, for players to solve. And I guess the hypothesis, or what we think, is that opening up the number of defense teams that a player could potentially use, it kind of forces the player to take risks. And what I mean by that is, like, instead of just conservatively, you know, using your first main 5, maybe you have to experiment a little bit to kind of use a secondary defense team that has a different type of meta or a different type of abilities or strategy compared to the first defense team. Because there's no guarantee you're going to be able to create like 2 taunt teams or 2 bleed teams. You're based on what you have available, you're going to have to kind of like switch it up and create different type of defensive strategies and different type of teams. So yeah, I hope it does force players like, definitely take more risks in terms of the type of defensive teams they're willing to try out. And hopefully they have success in it.
Absolutely. And the team building for me is one of the most fun things about the game is figuring out exactly how I want to build things out to win certain engagements. And so having this, I think, will definitely create a whole new way that we look at how a player builds their defenses. It might even come down, instead of smashing your most leveled, most powerful tunes on one defensive team and calling it a day, you might split up your powerful characters over all your defensive teams to make sure that each one of them are presenting a certain strategy. We might see a whole new world. I think the excitement behind the idea of multiple defense teams is awesome. I think from a player standpoint, I would be super excited to see what I could do and put together. And from a designer standpoint, I think it only increases the health and the longevity of our game.
And when we say, multiple, there's no like number that I don't think we've set at all or talked about. It could be like 2 or 3, or I don't know how much you got. What's in your roster? The future is bright. Let's just start there and see what we come with. Tell us what you think down below. Let's talk about something that I've heard a lot of people talk about, and I've heard some people say they love and some people say they hate. Rebuilding in war. You get a quick one real quick, and sometimes that quick one turns into another quick one and another quick one and another quick one. Coin wars. Let's talk about limited rebuilds, because I know that this is something that has been a topic amongst the team as well. Not just the 15-second rebuild, but what comes after that.
Yeah, and in terms of the rebuilds, and it is something that we've talked about. I think even internally, we kind of understand the player's perspective, especially if you're not a player that has you're from a faction that doesn't have the same amount of resources as maybe like a higher spend or a higher tier faction. Like, it really puts players at a disadvantage that, beyond that first, 15-second rebuild, you can kind of just coin your way to success. And even on the product and design team, we don't think that's the optimal strategy for war, to be able to just have this unlimited way to just coin your way to success. We do think that there should be some type of limit placed for repairs or rebuild, as you would say, because we do think like by limiting in limitation can lead to some interesting strategies from players, where maybe depending on the situation, they're fighting an opponent that's maybe stronger than them. Maybe they just don't use it at all. But maybe if they feel like they're close in a battle and they just need to repair to kind of get over the hump and score some more points, I think it's useful. So I think it being used sparingly is something that we'd want to kind of look at, rather than having this kind of uncapped potential for players of the higher end to kind of coin their way through. So we would like to even the playing field a little bit and make it a little bit more strategic than it's just about, coining or just spending in order to get ahead in war. It doesn't feel right, at least internally. So we're definitely talking about it and thinking through it.
I think that, again, what you'll be listening to is a common thread here. When we have gone through war, we're now reevaluating everything about the competitive integrity, right? We want to limit the amount of times players can cheese victories or try to cheese a system or abuse something. We want war to be the place that you go to just showcase your skill and talent, to showcase your faction, and then brag about your successes.
I know we've also had discussions in relation to coining and rebuilding about lower defenses. Maybe Wza, you could talk a little bit about this. Scouting, lower defenses. There's some changes coming there.
Yeah, I know we've dealt with scouting forever, and there's a lot of things left to be desired. Like, we know when you scout out a team and then you go in, you fight that team, and it's a different team because people are swapping defenses at the last second. Not fun, right? The whole point of scouting was to allow you to see the puzzle, then go solve the puzzle before you go into the fight and be rewarded for that. That changing not good, right? We also know that in the past, people have abused the dropping of defenses to try to have their people that they're competing with get pushed up in ranks and compete with other factions that they normally wouldn't be able to compete with if they had dropped their defenses, or vice versa. It's a very kind of shady area. And coming from our standpoint, again, competitive integrity, when we're looking at war as a whole, and these kind of things that happen where players can take advantage of the system, we're looking to diminish. Now, from a design standpoint of why this is cool, if we're talking about multiple defense teams and we're talking about figuring out the puzzle, we think team building should be the core essential of showcasing your skills. So why are we hiding this information from the player? We're thinking about moving away from a scouting and into a planning phase where players can just see the enemy's teams. They can see the defenses, they can see what those characters are. The idea is, as a player, you should be able to see what your enemy has. Then if you go into your toolbox of characters and have the right tools, you should be able to feel like you can successfully defeat that team in a timely manner during war. And that should be the fun part. Now, how you build out your defensive teams to try to get around this is another cool thing that we'll try to figure out, and how the meta will change around doing that. But also, being able to drop your defenses or change your defenses kind of throws all that out the window. So we want to make sure that you can lock in your defenses and you're trying to stall out the attacking team for as long as humanly possible. And so we want to get rid of a lot of that tediousness. And from the people and the players that I've talked to, my faction mates that I've talked to, I think scouting turning into more of a planning, seeing everything is a much desired change.
And I know from the other side of it, some of us have lowered defenses for those other teams who may have a hard time hitting our defense to just be a good sport, and maybe we'll all repair and it'll help everybody out. On the other side of maybe it's used to kind of screw over your opponent in another way.
Right. I think that's a great point, Mason. The problem, there's a lot of good stuff that happens with it too. We've seen that, but when you look at it as a whole, you're like, all right, we have people helping out others to try to hit their milestones. That's fantastic. But when at the upper echelons of competitive game, we do not want players to ruin that sort of who should win what because of things like dropping your defenses and letting other people score. So it is a give or take. And I think in this regard, it's more important for us to strengthen the competitive integrity of war at the top end than to allow for people to be super kind. And believe me, I've dropped defense for lower teams myself with my it's just it's a cool guy move, right? Like, it's a good thing to do, but in the end, people are abusing it the other way, and I think that's much more harmful to the health of the game.
Another part of the puzzle when it comes to war are those towers, and putting a defense in the team. What does the tower do? There's been a lot of conversation about strongholds and what can be done with them. I know internally, I've seen conversations about them, and EZE, maybe you can speak to some of the thoughts or the ideas in the future of strongholds.
We believe internally that war strongholds, or war towers, as you would say, like, it has the potential to be more meaningful from a strategy standpoint at top end play when it comes to war. And Invisionary, you could probably speak to this much better than I, but one of the things we've kind of been seeing is in terms of how top factions engage with these towers is they don't really want to hold them. It's like players, they want to basically use it, like attack a tower, use Rocket Abe to kind of clear the tower as quickly as possible, and just kind of keep dropping the tower in order to farm war cans or war energy. That's an unintended consequences of the way the war tower feature was designed, and also the way Rocket Abe was designed in the past. But we think there's much more potential for war towers to really have more of an impact in terms of the way players actually strategize, and also make it more critical to a player's success in war. And by success in war, I mean accumulating more war points than your opponent and ranking highly in war, and also once it all adds up, qualifying for WoC and winning WoC. So and what I mean by that, imagine a world where holding a tower by having your faction mates place defense team on a captured war tower. It's almost kind of like what is a King of the Hill type thing, where you place your defense team on the tower, and holding that tower gives you in a lot more points, faction war points, when you attack your opponent. And you want to hold the tower for as long as possible, so you need a good defense team. And then it's this kind of back and forth between you and your opponent holding the tower and trying to get as many bonus points with it before the war ends. So that's the kind of dynamic we're kind of looking at for the future. And we think like actually holding the tower and using your defense team to hold the tower could be an interesting way for players at the top end to really play.
And another use for more of the characters on your team. You're right. I mean, are you ghosting it? Are you just farming it for cans? Does anybody actually stack? Do people even hit towers? Or are we just going after the mercs? We suffer from these problems, but we're getting to all of them one by one. I don't know if we'll ever solve that whole hitting the mercs first thing. That's a
whole different ball of wax. Yeah,
that's different. That's not us. So we've had a lot of talk here about hypotheticals, ideas, directions we can go in for the future of war. But let's talk about a few things like War of Champions. And let's reveal something. We haven't done this yet. A lot of people have been asking, because we did say there will be some additional stuff included when it comes to the winners for like War of Champions. I know that we have some very cool concept art to show here. Easy, do you want to tell us what we have in store?
Yeah, sure. So I can talk a little bit about this. So one of the things that we're really excited about is, I hope players kind of understood what we were trying to do here when we made the initial War Season 3 WoC announcement, is like, for players who were successful and were able to reach the pinnacle of war and to win, right? We really want to give those factions a way to basically immortalize themselves in the game, almost kind of like you're a celebrity in the game, and everyone in the game sees like the impact, the lasting impact, and the what is the word? The stamp you left on the game for an extended period of time, maybe even forever, right? So one of the things we really want to announce is the winner of WoC, meaning the faction who plays first for the next War Season 4. Throughout that entire War Season 4, the name of the faction of that winning faction is going to be displayed on the war map for future Blitz Wars and war qualifiers throughout the entirety of the Season 4. So imagine seeing like a signpost in the war map that says, whatever faction's name or another faction's name or something like that. I don't want to play favorites and name factions, but you know what I mean.
I do. I have actually turned all the concept art into generic names so as not to point anyone out. Cool. But yes, like the legend lives on well beyond your War of Champions.
Yeah.
Yo, let's not get it twisted. The one cool thing about war is the bragging rights, right? Telling people that you are better than them. Having it on the map. I've seen the concept, dude. Great idea. I love it. It looks great. It's right in front of their faces too. It's not like we're not hiding it. It's really cool.
So you are immortalized forever. Your legend lives on in the war map basically for the next season. That's what you're saying, right? So Season 4 will display the Season 3 winners, like putting up the banner.
Exactly. Yeah. So winner of Season 3 WoC their banner will be displayed on the war map throughout Season 4, and you can kind of see how that continues for winner of Season 4. It would be displayed in the war map for Season 5 and then some.
Got it. That's the plan moving forward. I like that. And there's more on the way. So just, I'd say keep an eye on the web portal, find the blog there, and you can get a look at all the info as it comes out as we approach not only this War of Champions, but everything else that's on the way. This has been an awesome conversation. I really appreciate, kind of two of the architects, really the people who are making the game happen from not only day to day, week to week, month to month, and in the future here. As you get to see, a first look at Lee's art with Wza there. We're revealing little pieces here and there, and I want to actually talk a little bit maybe answer a few player questions coming up and maybe reveal a few more things. But before we do, like hypothetical situation here, some of us have these fighters on our roster, right? And they're just like, they're maybe one skill away from being, I would throw them in my team in a minute. Is there any world, and I don't think this is something we've done before, where we have made a change to a fighter, like a retune or maybe a rebalance of fighters? Is this something? It might be able to bring a fighter back into relevance now that if we're talking about opening up to more defenses. Is this something we could do? Is this something we'd be open to discussing?
Yeah. So this is a really crazy topic to go into. So I'm the guy who is designing the combat meta, planning it out with everybody on the team. We test things out, we play test it, we move things forward, and yes, sometimes characters, they fall out of good graces. And moving forward, like with all these kind of things that we're talking about, with multiple defense teams and making things last longer, your tower defense is mattering more. It's just naturally you're going to need more characters, and who wants to have a really terrible team as their second or third defense, or their team that's holding on to a tower? And I don't know how long you've been playing, but back earlier on in my days, I created like a free-to-play team named Adam. He was like a pizza delivery guy, and he was just really terrible. And I felt really bad, and we went back and we buffed him later on, and we just threw a buff in there because we just wanted to throw the players a bone. And we've done this, a few times where we've just taken a character and been like, you know what, this isn't exactly the greatest thing, and we push it up and we make it relevant and for the players. Now we're talking about things, we're looking at multiple defensive teams, and if we do go that route, completely hypothetical. Remember, one of the things I want to hit on is anything that I talk about, chances are it could not happen. But we think about these things and we're like, all right, what if we, do these maybe seasonal buffs to characters, bring them up to make them relevant, so you can really have this big toolbox of useful characters. I don't want, when we're talking about all this cool stuff, I don't want the player to be like, oh great, yeah, you're talking about multiple defense teams, well, I'll have one good one and a bunch of crappy ones. That's not the plan. Like, I would love to see a world where you could make a ton of very strong, powerful teams that are all relevant in the meta. And this means, curbing power creep. Now, power creep will always exist, but, drawing that back in a little bit, making other characters more relevant, buffing characters that haven't been seen in a while, right? I think we all love Sandy, we all love the old Andrea, but they're just not useful anymore. Maybe buffing a certain Carl that has never seen the light of day, right? There could be a wealth of opportunity there to make fun, interesting combat by going down that route. Now, obviously, there's pros and cons to everything, and there's cons to consider in buffing characters and balancing them in general. And so, it's something that we got to keep a very close eye on. I know a lot of games out there do balance patches. We are considering what that means for our game. I know that we haven't generally done that, but it's definitely not out of question.
Yeah, and definitely want to add my 2 cents to this, because I agree with you. Balancing or balance changes is something that has to be done delicately. And if we were to think about doing this in the future, we have to really put a lot of thought into this. And what I mean by that is, like, on one hand, you talked about the pros and cons, right? On the one hand, like, I think, there's other games that do this, but implementing balance changes could add like a lot of excitement to the community and for players, because it's something they can anticipate. It provides them another puzzle, right? Basically another puzzle to put together in terms of like the best team, how the way they're thinking about team strategy and building changes with each balance patch, and could add freshness to each war season and so forth, right? But on the other hand, we also need to realize that there's different types of players in our game, and we need to think about like all players, like whether there's going to be maybe players that just put their free time and they don't spend any money, and also there's other players across that spectrum that do invest a lot of money in these characters. So we do need to, if we do think about this, we need to have a solution that kind of respects players across the entire spectrums, because what we don't want is to like completely players to make an investment in a character, right? And then to just kind of like completely invalidate their investment, too soon. So that's something we don't want to do. So it's a touchy subject, and something that if we do decide to go down this route, it's going to need a lot of thought. But we do want to at least collect some feedback from and thoughts of the community on how they think about this or how they feel about this in the future.
Absolutely. That's a perfect point. And the people listening to this, I want them to understand that if we do any of this, we will communicate to players. It's not something that we're going to do willy-nilly. It's not like you're going to wake up someday and then your characters will change. The balance changes would be something that were planned well out. You would know about it way in advance. We wouldn't drop it right before war change. Like, there's a lot of things that go into this. And I think it's just a perfect point to bring up about invalidating players' spend and investment in certain characters. Like, we absolutely wouldn't want to bring up an old free-to-play character and then it just completely knock out something that you've put a lot of money and time into. And that's something that, like I said before, a lot of pros and cons, and I'm glad that EZE just brought up a very big con that we would have to consider, right? Yeah. So keep in mind that when you hear this, some of you might get excited, some of you might look at it a little differently, but know that we're not going to jump into anything. It's not going to be something that we think willy-nilly. It's not going to be something that's going to happen to you overnight, and it's not going to be something where you never know what's coming down the turn.
I do like the idea, right? Like, 'cause I don't want to come off as the money grubbing product guy. There's definitely pros and cons.
I think it's important that players know, because they probably don't think that we have these discussions, right? Like, they don't think that we weigh both pros and cons. They probably think that we look at it with just one perspective, but we do have like immense conversations about not just this, but like everything about this game that goes into it, everything we love and hate about this game. We have immense conversations about. So maybe that is a bigger conversation for the next podcast. And we can kind of cap it there and wrap with a few community questions. One that I know a lot of people have been asking about is, how am I going to get my first edition War of Champions qualifier Romanov? Can you give us the plan, EZE?
Yeah, I can give the high level plan. I don't want to go into too many specifics, but at a high level, what we're going to set up is for players that do qualify for WoC, they are going to be able. I think we'll send out communications. They're going to be able to kind of transfer into the WoC regions or the War of Champions regions, and once they get there, we're going to present them with different museum collections. So basically, the way it's going to work is, if you're a character that was able to acquire Romanov and also upgrade and tier up Romanov, you're going to be able to exchange that Romanov for the standard Romanov for like the war veteran version of Romanov through like a museum collection in the WoC region. Also, I know players, the alarm bells are ringing in their heads right now. Players already have upgraded and leveled up and invested a lot of resources in Romanov. So what we're going to do is, those museum collections, like, it's going to detect whether or not you upgraded Romanov to a certain level, whether it's limit break 3 or 2 or 1 or grade 4 or whatever, right? It's going to detect the level at which your Romanov is at. And not only is it going to provide you with the war veteran version of Romanov and the copies of Romanov that you need to tier back to that level that you unlocked, we're going to refund the resources that you used to upgrade your Romanov. So I'm talking the military supplies, Madeline, Maddox's, trainers, Brady's, Benedict's, medals, gold medals, like the resources that you would theoretically need to upgrade the character at a specific, level and tier requirement that you unlocked in the museum. You're going to get your resources back. So I just wanted to like calm players down. If they're worried about that, you will get your resources back, and probably a little bit extra depending on which museum collection you unlock.
That's great to hear. That's fantastic. I've seen a lot of people asking that question. Next up, something that we've all come to be expecting every Valentine's Day. Are we going to see Davie back again? I feel like we just had a Mythic Davie. Are we getting another Mythic Valentine's Day Davie?
I can announce that we are going to get a Valentine's Day Davie. So players can look out for that. He'll come in a limited time event and in February or around Valentine's Day. So, players can look out for that.
At this point in time, can there be a Valentine's without Davie? I don't think so. I'd quit. I'd leave my job. I'd get out of here. I'd go find something else to do with my. Davie is our Valentine character forever or always, and IMO.
And he's looking dapper in his white tux and his cufflinks and his glasses. I love it. He looks great. It's good to hear. Davie forever. The last question that I had was that what everybody wanted to ask when we announced Mythic Exclusive War. What about my rocket, Abe? I know we talked a little bit about that, but I kind of wanted to pull the curtain back. But pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Was Rocket Abe supposed to be the tower god that he is?
No. So, I mean, anybody who has played video games for any length of time, there is always something that comes up that players discover that's unintended, and it turns out to be cool. When it was never intended for Abe to do what he does, but then when it was discovered that that's how players were taking advantage of Abe, we thought, okay, well, why not, right? It's not hurting anything, and it's something that they were inventive, creative, and figured out. And just because it didn't go to the intent of the design doesn't mean that we have to go in there and fix it when it doesn't need to be fixed. But again, we talked a lot about competitive integrity. You know, that's kind of been the focal point of war and what we're going through, and we want to make sure that these like cheese strategies or I could just beat out a bunch of walkers with Abe kind of goes back to the days of old. Now we know that can make war a little bit more tedious, right? Everybody's probably, smacking their forehead right now, but we hope that in the future we can provide a lot of value to towers and defeating teams on those towers and defeating walkers and that actually matter to the competition. I think that's just pretty much it, right? Where we stand with Abe.
No, you kind of summed everything up perfectly, and I kind of alluded to this when I was talking about the tower stronghold, how we can think about war towers and its importance in the future. Just to kind of recap that, we want it to be more about holding towers. In place, using your defense teams to hold towers to increase your ability to win at war, either through scoring more points and whatnot, instead of kind of like dropping towers and trying to like farm war cans and stuff like that. So I mean, are there ways in which we can make up for players' loss in terms of their ability to farm through the war towers by increasing the amount of war cans they receive in each war? Sure, it's not a problem.
Rocket Abe had a nice run, and I think
yeah, he did.
For the life of any character, maybe the longest held in regard. So may he send off into the sunset, Rocket Abe. Now that the Mythic era is here, the Mythic Exclusive Wars are on and will be for War of Champions. Easy. Wza, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for this conversation. I really appreciate it. I want to reiterate to everybody that is listening / watching, this has been just discussion and conversation. None of this is an official declaration, other than that Romanov stuff that we might have let sleep. But anyway, would love to know your feedback about all of these topics in the comments down below. So, gentlemen, thank you both for joining me. We really appreciate it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Glad to be here. Good chat.
Talk to you later.
There you have it, a little sneak peek into some of the things that we're working on, not only in the near future with Valentine's Day, but for the future of war, our pinnacle event here at the Walking Dead Road to Survival. If you have feedback, we'd love to hear it in the comments down below. If you like where we're headed, leave a like, maybe consider subscribing. Join us for more official content from the Walking Dead Road to Survival here on YouTube. Please let me take this opportunity to say thank you once again for your time, not only listening if you've made it this far in the podcast, but for your time with the game. We really appreciate you. I'm looking forward to our next episode of The Road, where I think we'll chat a little bit more with Wza from this episode, but more specifically about character, design, kits, and maybe even a special guest to check in that we haven't heard from in a while. I hope to see you back here again for it. Thank you so much for watching.